Greetings, boys and girls. Welcome to part 3 of the top 100 prog rock bands of all time. On today's episode, we're going to be exploring numbers 41 through 60. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm really hoping that you guys are loving this as much as I am. I'm not going to go through anything else here. We're going to go right into it. At number 60. We're going to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Glass Hammer, formed in 1992 by Steve Babb and Fred Schendel. Their first album came out in 93, The Journey of the Dunedain. Apparently, they went on like QVC or Home Shopping Network to hawk this CD, and it did well, and they sold out, and that gave them the encouragement to keep going. They have 20 albums out. Well, if you include the one that's coming out later this year. Steve and Fred have had a whole bevy of different musicians joining them. Particularly the vocalist section has been a real revolving door. Right now you got Hannah Pryor, but prior to that you had Walter Moore, Susie Bogdanovich, Carl Groves, and a guy you might know who joined a little band called Yes later on, called John Davison. They used Roger Dean on the 2005 The Inconsolable Secret album cover. But to me, their best albums were with John Davison. Starting with 2010 was If, 2011 Corcordium, and 2012 Perilous. All three of those albums are great. They are now working on a trilogy, the Scalagrim trilogy. They've got 2 down. A third is coming out. Great stuff, very Yes-like. They're retro prog, but I really like them. At number 59, going to the Canterbury scene, we're talking about Egg. Yeah, Egg, Dave Stewart, Mont Campbell, and Clive Brooks. What a great trio they were. They only put out 3 albums, so they better have been pretty doggone strong, and yes, they are. The debut album came out in 1970. The Polite Force in 71, and Civil Surface in 74. These guys have a lot of Bach in them. There's a whole bunch of classical influences in their music. It's really dominated by Dave Stewart's organ, so sometimes it makes you think a little bit of ELP in a Canterbury setting, but all 3 albums from Egg, highly recommended. I really like them a lot. And number 58, let's talk about Magenta. Yeah, the great Welsh band formed in 1999 from the ashes of Rob Reed's Scion project. He had recorded a couple albums as Scion and then started working with this female vocalist named Christina Booth, and he realized he needed another color-themed band to help differentiate between what he was doing before and the stuff with Christina. And so Magenta was born. Their debut album, 2001, Revolutions, a double album, really great in that Genesis style. 2004, Seven, talking about the 7 Deadly Sins, really good album. I'm a big fan of 2008's Metamorphosis. 2013's The 27 Club is fantastic. Talking about some of the artists who died at 27 is really cool. And let's not forget 2020 Masters of Illusion. What a terrific record that was. Magenta's fantastic. If you like Yes, if you like Genesis, if you're cool with female vocals, you're going to love Magenta. At number 57, let's go to Cologne, Germany, and Triumvirat. Formed in 1969 by Hans-Jürgen Fritz and the drummer Hans Bathlet. They put out their debut album in 73. It was called Mediterranean Tales, and it was really, really good. But then they got a new singer, bass player, Helmut Kohlin, and he changed everything for them. Their second album, Illusions on a Double Dimple, was fantastic. Their third album, Spartacus, even better. Their fourth album, Old Loves Die Hard, came out in 1976. And then Pompeii after that. And then they put out a couple real bad records. But their first 3 or 4 albums, fantastic. People always compared them to ELP. They were dead wrong. After Spartacus was recorded, Helmut Kohlin was working on a solo album. He was listening to demos in his car, and he decided to commit suicide. Very, very sad. Fabulous stuff. Number 56. We're talking about Italy's Goblin. What a strange band with a convoluted history. I mean, right now there's 3 different bands calling themselves Goblin going on the road and one calling themselves Cherry 5, which Goblin began as Cherry 5. They were kind of a yesy sounding kind of thing. Apparently one of the guys in the band got a hold of Eddie Offord, who decided that these guys were really great and helped promote them and, helped them meet the right people. So that Cherry 5 record came out in 75. Really, really good. Very yesy. Singing in English. And then they did their first soundtrack for Dario Argento, a director with whom Goblin is most closely associated. He did Profondo Rosso in 75. Then he did Suspiria in 77. Tenebrae in 82. And Goblin did all of those. There's like dozens and dozens of Argento movies that Goblin did the soundtracking for. The band was Claudio Simonetti, Massimo Morante, Fabio Pignatelli. Claudio Simonetti has his own version of Goblin. Massimo Morante has, I guess that's just called Goblin. And then Fabio's got Goblin Reborn. And then there's a version of Cherry 5 out there. And somewhere along the line, they released one album, only one album that was not soundtrack related, 1976's Roller, which is fantastic. Yeah, just really scary and dark and cool. I really love Goblin a lot. At number 55, we're going to the Motor City and Discipline. You don't think of Detroit as a hotbed for prog? Well, I don't either, but Discipline was formed in 1987 by Matthew Parmenter. He would put on the face paint and stuff, make you think of Peter Gabriel or Fish, but musically these guys are much closer to Van der Graaf Generator. Their music's dark, it's introspective, it's, really moody, and I just really enjoy what they do. They've only got 5 albums out. So these 5 albums better be great. The first 2 were good. Debut, Chaos Out of Order came out in 88. In 94, Push Your Profit. But then the next 3 were just incredible. 1997, Unfolded Like Staircase finally came out on vinyl this year. Woohoo! 2011, To Shatter All Accord, and in 2017, Captives of the Wine Dark Sea. Terrific records. Those last 3 Discipline albums are just incredible. So good that they made the top 100. At number 54, it's Atomic Rooster, boys and girls, from the ashes of Arthur Brown's Crazy World. Vincent Crane and Carl Palmer decide to join a band, form a band together. The debut album in 1970 had Nick Graham on vocals. Their second album, also in 1970, Carl Palmer's gone for ELP, Nick Graham's gone, and they hire John Ducan to sing and Paul Hammond on drums. And that second album, just so great. I'm spotlighting it here. Death Walks Behind You, such an amazing album. The third album, In the Hearing Of, he had a new singer, Pete French. I like John Ducan better. And then they came out with a couple of really weak albums in the 70s. 1972's Made in England. 1973's Nice and Greasy. Not good at all. And then they had 2 that were even worse in the 80s, but those first 3 Atomic Rooster albums, that heavy prog, Vincent Crane's organ, just really dynamite. And you even got Roger Dean doing one cover for them. Yeah, Atomic Rooster, one of the originators. At number 53, this is probably the one that I might get questioned on the most, but I don't care. I love this band. It's Jordsjø out of Norway, formed in Oslo in 2014. They are a duo. It's Håkon Oftung and Christian Froland. Their first 3 albums were only available on cassette. Jordsjø in 2015, Jordsjø II in 2016, and then the third cassette, Jord, got a whole bunch of attention from people like me that discovered them, and my mind was blown, so they went ahead and reissued it on CD and on album, and then their next 2 albums were available in all formats, Naphthalin in 2019, and Pastoralia in 2021. I love Jordsjø so much. These guys have that pastoral, really cool sound. You know, you hear a little Jethro Tull and stuff, but they're so interesting to listen to. The songwriting's great. I just love Jordsjø so much. Fantastic stuff at number 52. It's Nektar, another band with a really strange pedigree, a strange history. These guys were British, but they were in West Germany, so they formed the band in Hamburg in 1969. They were a six-piece, but only four of them played instruments. Of course, you had the great Roy Albrighton on guitars and vocals, Taft Freeman on keyboards, Mo Moore on bass, and Ron Howden on drums. But they were joined by Mick Brockett on liquid lights and Keith Walters on static slides. It's kind of weird. I don't really understand. But Nektar, not your typical prog band. They take a lot of elements from space, and they even have some funky stuff, you know, some funky wah-wah guitar going on. They're just nothing like Yes or Genesis, but I love them. I discovered them back in 1973. I walked into a record store and I saw Remember the Future, and I bought it just on the strength of the album cover. Their first album came out in 1971, Journey to the Center of the Eye. It's a good record. The next year, A Tab in the Ocean came out, and that's just amazing. Iron Maiden actually covered some of this material. In 73, they put out Sounds Like This, which was okay, but they also put out Remember the Future, which was amazing. 74, Down to Earth, which is kind of a circus-themed concept album. 1975, Recycled, another amazing album, kind of more of a Gentle Giant feel going on. After that, Roy left the band, and then he came back. By the time he came back, everybody else was gone, and Nektar was never the same. But those first few Nektar albums are just amazing, just great stuff. At number 51, it's Moon Safari, formed in 2003 in Sweden. They got their start recording some demos. They gave them to Thomas Bodine from the Flower Kings. He went on to produce their first album, 2003's A Doorway to Summer. That's actually 2005. Excuse me, they were formed in 03. Their first album came out in 05. And they are best known for those crazy 5-part vocal harmonies led by Simon Atkinson and Peter Sandstrom. Their next album, their second album, 2008, Bloomeljude. Oh, man, that's a masterpiece, double album, incredible. Their third album, Lover's End, came out in 2010. And then in 2013, we saw Himmelbacken Volume 1, and we have been waiting for Volume 2. Apparently, they are wrapping it up. They're working with Rich Mauser, apparently, on it. So, yeah, hopefully we will be getting album number 5 from Moon Safari real soon. I hope so, because they are just incredible. At number 50, bust out your croom horns. It's Gryphon, boys and girls. Formed in 1972 by some members of the Royal College of Music, Graham Taylor, Dave Oberle, Richard Harvey, and Brian Gouland. Their manager was promoting them as, if Henry VIII was in a rock and roll band, they'd sound like this. So yeah, roll up all those medieval, Renaissance kind of instrumentation. As the years went on, they dispensed with them a little bit. More traditional type of rock and roll instrumentation started appearing on their records, but their 1973 debut is very medieval sounding. 74's Midnight Mushrooms also, but they kind of had a stylistic change in 74 with Red Queen to Gryphon 3. Apparently, this is about the same time that Rick Wakeman had met up with the members of Gryphon, since they all went to the Royal College of Music together, and they were introduced to Brian Lane, who was Yes's manager, and he took over Gryphon, and they toured together a little bit, so they had a little bump there. It didn't last. 1975's Rain Dance didn't sell as good. 1977's Treason was their final record of the 70s. They've come back in the 2000s with 3 of their original members. I guess Richard Harvey is not a part of it, but the other 3 founding members have put out 2 records, Reinvention and something about my dad's car. They're both pretty good, actually. At number 49, it's the Deer Hunter. Yeah, emo prog, I guess you could call it. This is Casey Crescenzo, who was a dude in an emo band called The Receiving End of Sirens. He'd been working on some material that didn't really fit what the band was doing. So they got fed up with it and they kicked him out of the band, which is the best thing that could have ever happened, because shortly thereafter, he released Act 1 of a supposed 6-part story. He's got 5 so far. We're waiting on part 6. Part 2 came out in '07. Part 3 came out in '09. And then he did a couple non-sequential things. He did a whole thing called the Color Spectrum, where he had an EP for each color of the rainbow, and then collated it together as an album. He did a standalone album called Migrant, which was amazing. And then in 2015 comes the classic Act 4, probably the best thing he's ever done. The following year, Act 5 came out. Now he's on to something new called the Indigo Child. A new album dropped a couple months ago called Antimai. It's really great, but I'm wondering if we'll ever get a part 6. I hope so, because Deer Hunter is so cool. He was so smart putting this storyline in the early 1900s so he could use all this weird stuff and different influences, vaudevillian kind of stuff, old-timey kind of sounding stuff. Deer Hunter's amazing. If you don't know him, you got to check him out. At number 48, a band with only 2 albums. They better be really good albums. That's all I'm saying. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the Hatfield and the North. They were active from 1972 to 1975. Like I said, they only put out 2 albums. The Stunning debut in '74 and the Rotters Club in '75. They were made up of guitarist Phil Miller, Dave Stewart, Richard Sinclair, and Pit Pile. If you know anything about the Canterbury scene, you know who those guys are. And on these 2 albums, they were joined by like a constellation of stars from the Canterbury scene. You got Robert Wyatt on the debut. You got Jimmy Hastings and Tim Hodgkinson and Lindsey Cooper and Mont Campbell on the second album. Which one's better? I don't know. I think I like the first one better. But yeah, for a band to only have 2 albums and make this list, these 2 albums are amazing. They are just great, pushing the envelope as far as Canterbury could go. These are the best 2 Canterbury albums out there for my money, and that's why they make the list, whereas some other Canterbury band with only 2 albums did not. I wonder who that could be. At number 47, it's Keith Emerson and the Nice. Proto-Prog band formed in 1967. One of those bands, if they had never existed, there's a good chance Prog would not be here. Obviously, Keith Emerson is just a giant in the progressive rock field. He's joined by Lee Jackson, Dave O'List, and Brian Davison. Lee and Brian actually went on to form a band called Refugee after the Nice broke up with Patrick Moraz, so that was pretty cool. Their debut album, The Thoughts of Emerlis Davjek, came out in 1968. Later on that year, Ars Longa Vita Brevis. In 1969, an album called Nice came out. And then their final album, 1975, Bridges. There was a posthumous album, a Eulogy or something like that. That was like some live bits. But they really only had 4 albums. And they're all great. Are they pure prog? No, they're proto-prog. But we're talking about Keith Emerson here, people. The Nice has to make this list. The Nice is critical. They're absolutely foundational to the creation of our beloved genre. At number 46, let's go to Sweden and a band that did more than possibly anybody else to resurrect our beloved genre from the ash heap of history in the 90s. We're talking about Anekdoten. Yeah, these guys are just amazing. They've only got 6 albums out, which is just insane because they've been together for like 30 years. And what's even crazier is it's the same 4 people in the band. There's been no attrition at all. So you got Nicholas Barker, Jan Erik Liljestrom, Anna Sophie Dahlberg, and Peter Nordens make up the band. I guess in the last couple years, they've been joined by Marty Wilson Piper, the great guitarist from that band, The Church, which is kind of a weird, combination. I don't understand the juxtapositioning of The Church and Anekdoten, but who cares? Anekdoten is known mainly for being that band with 100 different mellotrons going on all at the same time. Their music is dark, it's dense, it's kind of spooky, and it does make you think early King Crimson. There's no doubt about it. 93's debut, Vermod, just incredible. 1995, Nucleus came out. 99, From Within. 2003, Gravity. 2007, Time of Day. And in 2015, Until All the Ghosts return. Or something like that, I forget. What an amazing run. All 6 of those albums are dynamite. Just so good. Same lineup, same sound more or less. They just hit you over the head with that Mellotron. If you don't like it, you can just get out of here. At number 45, let's go back to the US of A and echolyn. This is a band that was formed in Pennsylvania in 1989 at the absolute nadir of the Prog experience. There was nothing going on in Progland. Then these guys popped up, led by Brett Cull, Ray Weston, and Chris Busby. Their original drummer was Paul Ramsey, who when he quit the band, he actually had the rights to the name echolyn, so there was some legal issues to get echolyn back up and running. They have 8 albums out. Their debut came out in 91, and it was nice. I like it a lot, but it was 1992's Suffocating the Bloom that got them noticed, so much so that they actually got signed to Sony in 1993, and they put out As the World in 95. They were signed to like a 3-record deal. I don't know what made them think that a prog rock was going to be big in the early 90s. I bet that A&R guy lost his job. Well, I know for sure what happened was echolyn lost their record contract when sales weren't as expected. But they would bounce back nicely. In 2000, they put out the great album Cowboy Poems Free. And in 2002, their absolute masterpiece, May, which is one long song, is just incredible. Yeah, echolyn doesn't have all the pyrotechnics going on. There's a bit of Americana and more straightforward rock stuff going on here. But they're plenty progressive to me. I just love them. At number 44... it's going to be our very first experience with Neal Morse on this list. Also our first experience for Mike Portnoy, both of whom we'll probably hear from a little bit later. The Neal Morse Band was formed because Neal wanted to have a steady touring band. He got tired of having to hire people for US tours and then have another band on European tours. So he just wanted one band that he could use for whatever he was doing. And as a result, it morphed into an actual collaborative type of thing. So you've got Neal Morse, Mike Portnoy, Eric Gillette, Randy George, and Bill Hubauer. These 5 guys, man, they only have 4 albums out. The first one came out in 2015, The Grand Experiment, but it was their second album, the absolute masterpiece, one of the greatest progressive rock albums of all time, The Similitude of a Dream. And if that wasn't enough, they followed it up in 2019 with The Great Adventure, which is almost as good, telling the same story, but a little darker and a little heavier. And then last year, Innocence in Danger came out, which was such a great double album. The first disc was all shorter tracks. The second disc was 2 long epics. Yeah, Neal Morse Band. Hardly anybody does it better than that. If you like epic prog rock of the old school variety, the Neal Morse Band just might be your band. At number 43, it's Colloseum, formed in 1968 by John Heisman. This was one of the very first jazz rock bands, and some people say that Colloseum is the primary reason that jazz rock became so big later on in the next decade. They certainly opened the door for it in England. John is joined by Dave Greenslade on keyboards and the great Tony Reeves on bass, not to be confused with Colloseum II, which was another band with John Heisman and Gary Moore. So they were a little heavier. They put out 3 great albums, but we're focusing on Colloseum I. Their first album came out in 1969. That was For Those About to Die, We Salute You. Isn't that an AC/DC album? Their second album, though, 1969, also is a Valentine Suite, and that's the reason these guys are here on this list. The following year, the US label decided to do an album called The Grass is Greener, kind of using the same album cover and some different alternate stuff. And then 1970 also saw Daughter of Time, which was a decent album. But the reason Colloseum is here primarily is their impact, their influence, and that incredible second album at number 42. Let's go to the Netherlands, boys and girls. It's Kayak, formed in 1972. These guys have 18 albums under their belt, but it's their early stuff, obviously. It's their early stuff that gets me going. Their early lineup, you had Max Werner on vocals. He would later switch to drums for some reason. He claimed he hated the sound of his own voice. You're an idiot, dude. Your voice is amazing. Johann Slager on guitar, Ton Scherpenzeel on keyboards, Cees van Leeuwen on bass, and Pim Koopman on drums. What a great lineup. That first album, See the Sun, came out in 73. It's a lot of people's favorite. Kayak 2 came out in 74, Royal Bed Bouncer in 75, The Last Encore in 76, Starlight Dancer in 77, but I'm spotlighting Starlight Dancer because the American version took the best songs off the Last Encore, the best songs off of Starlight Dancer. They did an alternate version of the hit, which was way better than the UK version, and then they put a B-side on there. It's a greatest hits compilation, man. It's incredible. After that, Max went to drums. They hired a new vocalist. They put out Phantom of the Night in 78, which was okay. They bounced back in 81 with a good album called Merlin, but since then it's been kind of hit or miss, and they just are kind of one of those dinosaur bands, but their early stuff, just amazing, just amazing. And we're going to round out today's list with number 41. Let's talk about one of the kings of krautrock. It's Amon Düül II. Yeah, formed in Munich in 1968 by Chris Kerrer. They're joined by Renate Knapp, who was a beautiful but bizarre singer who kind of gave off some Grace Slick vibes, like deranged Grace Slick. They formed in, there was some kind of weird art commune called Amon Düül, and they were all like these left-wing hippies. I guess the Red Army faction was formed in that same commune, which is an extreme left-wing political group. Their first album came out in 69, Phallus Die. It was just chock full of crazy, hard, in-your-face improv. And then the next year, their masterpiece Yeti comes out, which was a four-sided beast. Our only respite from the craziness is side 2, where you actually have some songs. Sides 1, 3, and 4, just absolute craziness. 71, Sautans de la Mige. I love that album. Carnival in Babylon and Wolf City both came out in 72. Great albums. Their last good album was 73 with Viva La Trance, and they disbanded in 1981. I really love Amon Düül, as you guys know. Krautrock is not my thing. I'm pretty new to it, but I have been listening to a ton of it in the last year or two, and Amon Düül is just dynamite. I love what they do. Anyway, that's part 3. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Yeah, my bursitis is still kicking, but I don't care. 28 minutes. Oh, no. Oh, man. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry for keeping you this long. Anyway, I love you. Part 4 will be next week. Yeah, I'm taking tomorrow off. I'm tired. See you guys.